Right, so I guess a little bit about me. So first of all, I'm James, one of the co-founders of Origin. We're an NFT marketplace, been around for a few years. We were recently acquired by eBay, who wants to move from a peer-to-peer global marketplace into the digital space. And really what I'm going to talk about today, it's a topic that I've never presented on before, so bear with me. And it's a bit more about like, maybe in 2, 3, 4, 5 years, where will commerce be and what can decentralization bring to that? And for me and some of the people on my team, it's a particularly interesting topic, especially when you pair it with the likes of eBay, who do billions and billions of dollars of trade, peer-to-peer for people around the world. And disintermediation of that via decentralization is, you can see there's quite a lot of friction there, and it's sort of very opposite from what the last 20 years of the likes of eBay have done. Now we've been brought in to really challenge that mentality, and that's what really excites me a lot about it. So let's give it a go. So before going first forward, we've got to really look back about where we are now in terms of Web3. So the classic analogy of Web 2 is kind of like read-only, Netscape's early Yahoo. This is a consumption-only product. People put content out in a fairly low-fi form. It's not very dynamic, you consume it. And then you're into the likes of Web 2, which is prolific over the last sort of 20, 25 years. This is user-generated content, Facebook, YouTube, those other things. But Web 3 comes along, really only in the last 3 years, I would say, it's had any sort of real adoption, and it still is very young. And it introduces concepts of ownership and digital ownership, which is very new for the internet. And I guess some would say it's not that new, but it is new when there isn't a single authority issuing out that ownership. That's really the key to it. And that's really what at Known Origin we've been doing for the last 2 years, selling tens of thousands of NFTs created by our artists, sold to customers. The only thing we do is facilitate the trade with smart contracts on a website. There's no banking rails, there's no identity rails. It's a very different model to get your head into. But what I'm going to talk about soon is not only where Web3 is now in NFTs, but where it could be in the next sort of 5 years. And before that, it's really worth taking a look at where we are. So this is a vanity metric, let's call it. This is a logarithmic graph based on this is Ethereum, where the vast majority of Web3 is taking place at the moment, compared to the early days of the internet along the top. So you can see there's actually quite a lot of correlation between, logarithmic correlation between early internet adoption and future Web3 adoption. And these are the sort of graphs that are great to put up at this, but I think there's a lot of truth in this. The space is new, the technology is new, legislation is almost non-existent, which is a problem. But over the next sort of 5, 10 years, it will drip feed into much more of everyone's life. And this concept of being able to transact peer-to-peer without a centralized intermediary, and as well as having things like digital ownership trickle in, it's going to be big, at least in my mind. And then it's also worth thinking about like where we are. People think, NFTs are dead, crypto's dead. Well, I've been in crypto for 6 years now, and this is my 3rd real cycle. The only trajectory is up. Whether you buy in at the bottom or the top, over the last 6 years, trajectory is up. So here's a global market cap might be down. We take it with a pinch of salt. Developer activity is booming. It really is. Startup activity, raising money in this space is still very easy. Last year, the biggest sector that raised money in VCs was Web3. And I actually don't see any change for the next few years, really. Social media activity, again, on the up. So these are great indicators opposite to the price of cryptocurrency that is often used in the media to show where this space is going in my mind. And at the end of the day, I'm a big believer of where the developers are. The reality is that's where the customers are going to be at the end of the day. Shipping great products, finding product market fit, that's what we're after. And then sort of looking at where we've seen NFTs bloom, in the last few years. So there's 5 core categories that we're going to touch on. These are very digital native categories. So the first one is profile pictures. Now you've probably seen the likes of Bored Apes, or Doodles, or some other sort of NFT PFP project that's gone into the news of this picture of a monkey costs $90,000 or whatever. But really, profile pictures, in my mind, represent things like identity. It's your flex on the internet that no one can take off you. It's the sort of thing that is not as easy to do in the traditional Web2 sense. And then you've got art and music, and this is exactly what the vertical that KO currently sits in at the moment. So this is allowing creators from all around the world, digital native artists, sell their wares to a global audience. The traditional art scene is ripe for disruption. It's a closed ecosystem full of cliques and niches. It's who you know. It's an obvious place for disruption for digital art. The other emerging industry is gaming. I still think gaming is very early for the NFT space, in all honesty. The big incumbents in the space have really got to take down those silos, and why would they? They're obviously very fearful of it. But I do think that over the next sort of decade, 5 to 10 years, GameFi or gaming NFTs in general will hit mainstream, and maybe the promise of using your Zelda sword in one game and taking it to another game will eventually be true. The other concept, which I think is, again, a great facet of NFTs, is utility. And if you think about NFTs are really a vehicle for delivering ownership of something, whether that's access to an event, download of a feature, piece of digital art, a game asset. It's just digital ownership. And utility can be etched and weaved into NFTs at pretty much any point of their lifetime. And then the other more dubious one that I am also personally quite skeptical of is virtual worlds. So this is the idea of buying a plot in a metaverse that you can build your kingdom and people come and visit. But I think there's a little bit of a fallacy in there in my mind, and it's purely speculation driven for virtual worlds. It's like, if you want to bombard the masses, why gatekeep it with the need to buy a parcel when actually really you want everyone to come in and everyone to flourish in your metaverse? So they're the 5 categories that have really seen decent adoption, I would say, in the last couple of years, and some better than others. Art's been a big one, PFP's been a big one, and utility, but the other 2 are still quite immature. But what about the future? And that's what we're here to talk about. So I'm going to talk about this concept called decentralized commerce. And this is the idea of disintermediation of the e-commerce sector, really. And you think, why is he doing that? He's working for eBay, this is a centralized, but really that's why they bought us in the end. They wanted us to come in, introduce new ideas, try out new and pitch theses a little bit like I'm about to. Now, if you go back to the start of where decentralized commerce came from, it is already prevalent in the world today. You can go on TikTok, you can go on Snapchat, Instagram, you can pick up goods, you can buy it, but it's generally a poor experience, and it's taken many, many years to get there. You often have a big drop-off rate in the funnel from users, you often exit the app, there's no way to make the purchase atomically in there, and even if there was, it's custom integration, it's bespoke, it's proprietary. It doesn't allow for proliferation of the e-commerce sector in general. And in my mind, that's because of 4 key things. And that's because the inventory is siloed. So at the moment, like eBay's 1.6 billion current listings sit in their huge Oracle database behind the scenes. As I'm sure many people that work for e-commerce companies sit in their database. It's completely siloed. And you might say, I've got great APIs for it. And you might have great APIs, but every API is different. So you have 10 providers of the same service, 10 different integration points. You might have the best Swagger YAML in the world, the best developer docs, but it still means it's custom integration. There's no standards, it's all siloed. Settlement, again, very similar to payment, but you offload the customer. You have to make a credit card purchase, a PayPal purchase, whatever purchase of your payment rails of choice. Again, drop-off rates are high, integrations are custom and bespoke, complex to make, and if you do that at scale, at a global level, it's very tricky. And fulfillment, again, it's much harder to decentralize fulfillment, but some people are working on it, but again, it's a siloed surface. So in my mind, decentralized commerce exists today, but it's a very poor version of what could be. And that's really what I want to get into. And that really comes down to, excuse the American spelling, let's just take a look at it. Decentralization creates an environment of mutual trust where information is not controlled or regulated by a single entity, but distributed amongst all actors of the market. And what I'm pitching and proposing that within 5 or 10 years, all those points here, maybe not fulfillment, that's a little bit harder, but a lot of these points will be decentralized, and that has a lot of advantages. So let's get into why. So the first thing is the two key big technology unlocks that facilitate this in my mind. The first one is a shared inventory. Now, in crypto and blockchain, and particularly using NFT as the vehicle to deliver the ownership or the purchase aspect of the ownership, you then get into the point where every marketplace or every e-commerce site in the world can all share the same inventory. You know, you don't have eBay's items here, Amazon's items here, you just have items. Inside the NFT, you can etch, you know, what the thing is, the metadata, the provenance, the history, you know, how to buy and sell it, how to fulfill it. You know, there's lots of great aspects that you can etch into this vehicle of digital ownership. And I like to call that really the decentralized order book. And that's this concept of eventually everything's on the order book, not only the item, but also how to purchase the item. Two very big unlocks. And the other idea that will facilitate this is shared settlement. And that's the concept of, on a public infrastructure, public blockchains, you can have atomic, trustless, and provable settlement of these shared digital assets. That digital asset might represent a physical good that you can claim for an item in the future, but fundamentally it means that those payment rails, those silos, are knocked down. And those two key things in my mind, the decentralized order book and the decentralized settlement layer, which is in essence crypto and blockchain, will facilitate in the future decentralized commerce. And that's this very high level, you know, slightly waffly thing that we're talking about here. But I honestly actually think that this is, you know, not too far off it. Especially with today, that Instagram announced the ability to tokenize your images as NFTs. It's not that big of a leap for Instagram to tokenize what you're buying and selling on Instagram. Once they do that, they place the NFT in a shared order book and then anyone can settle those assets, whether it's on or off the platform. And the great thing about e-commerce platforms is you might think, why would they want to do that? Well, for them, it's all about getting eyeballs, right? It's always a fight for eyeballs. If you spread your inventory everywhere, you've got infinite eyeballs. And then the problem does change though. It's not as simple as just facilitating this. Curation is key. There's obviously huge compliance risks and all this sort of other legislative problems to solve. But fundamentally, these two key unlocks facilitate it. And in the NFT space, this is a terrible image, there is a platform that launched a couple of weeks ago. And interesting enough, these are 4 different marketplaces. This one aggregator shows prices from all marketplaces as well as listing. So you can go to this one place, but you can buy and sell the asset, even if the asset was listed to sell on a different marketplace, which is a very different mindset and a different world than what traditional Web2 commerce functions in today. And really we're seeing digital native goods really pioneer this. But there's no real reason why in the future you can't have physical goods. So it might be that the buyer and the seller, you build a protocol, you've got some redemption to do your fulfillment, you've got the physical engine to link the two together. You can token gate it. This is the idea of restricting who can buy it or sell it based on various concepts, and eventually all inventory will be shared, all inventory will be settled anywhere, and it really does change the game of e-commerce. And a very, very poor diagram I made for some engineers. So this is the concept of having different marketplaces on the top with their own, you know, these are, you know, not tokenicious as a Web3 thing, but marketplaces fight for eyeballs, right? They exist in their silos, their incentives, great UX curation products. Imagine if all their inventory was settled onto a shared order book, which is then settled on a shared atomic public layer. The fight changes and the fight goes to the top. You're still fighting for the eyeballs, but the inventory is shared. And that is it.